Hey everyone, you are on the 14th step. It's definitely a podcast. It might be about addiction and recovery. My name's Mark. I'm a professional counselor and a recovering addict.
My name is Skip. I'm a recovery coach and a recovering addict.
We're going to read a Just for Today meditation.
Just for today.
I think it's a good one.
Good.
This is March the 3rd. It's called Relapse. There will be times, however, when we really feel like using. We want to run and we feel lousy. We need to be reminded of where we came from and that it will be worse this time. This is when we need the program the most. That's from the basic text. If we're contemplating a relapse, we should think our using through to the bitter end. For many of us, those ends would include severe medical problems, imprisonment, or even death. How many of us have known people who relapsed after many years clean only to die from their disease? But there is a death that accompanies a return to active addiction that may be worse than physical death. That is the spiritual death we experience when we are separated from our higher power. If we use, the spiritual relationship we have nurtured over the years will weaken and perhaps disappear. We will feel truly alone. There is no doubt that we have periods of darkness in our recovery. There is only one way we can make it through those troubling times, with faith. If we believe that our higher power is with us, then we know that all will be well. No matter how badly we may feel in our recovery, a relapse is never the answer. Together we find recovery. If we stay clean, the darkness will lift and we will find a deeper connection to our higher power. Just for today, I thank my higher power for the gift of NA. I know that relapse is not the way out. Whatever challenges I face, I will face them with the God of my understanding.
You said something in there, and it is very true. I've known personally probably 3 people that were clean a pretty good long time, and they went back and relapsed and died.
Yeah.
Because I think one of them was because they got some fentanyl instead of what they tried to get, and the other ones were just simply from overdose because they, I guess, had detoxed and were sober long enough to where when they got the same amount that they had used when they were using.
It's a dangerous
and it just
time.
It put them out and they stopped breathing.
Yeah.
And they were by themselves, so nobody found them. Scary.
It's very scary. I don't think relapse ever just comes out of nowhere. I think it's a long process that happens over time, and it can happen for a bunch of different reasons, but I think fundamentally the reason is that we start to feel empty again. And when we start to feel empty or incomplete or alone, then we start to want to fill that with something.
Yeah.
And it can start with maybe a return to some kind of bad habit or a lack of discipline, or maybe we're eating too much, like we're trying to fill it with something. And eventually, if we stay miserable long enough, we're going to do what we know how to do.
You're going to run down the line of fixes.
Run down the line
until you get that one, man, the quick one.
Until you get the most effective one, which is popping a pill or a powder or taking a drink, and then you're going to find that relief. But there's nothing more sad than having a head full of recovery and a belly full of drugs or alcohol. That's a bad way to be. And I think that's part of the reason why it's always going to be worse, because if you are in recovery and you've built the kind of life that we build sometimes, like that good life where your family is okay and you have a lot of friends in recovery, you're involved, and then you relapse, that shame can eat you alive. And that is rocket fuel for a hard fall.
Spiraling down, especially if you started building back trust after such a long time.
And that takes forever. Family's a tough one. Relationships are the hardest part of recovery, I think.
And if the sad part of that is if you work the steps and you go through step 4 and step 5 and you figure out why that empty feeling comes to you and then you still relapse, you didn't really do what you were trying to accomplish. You know, it's the same thing. If anybody's ever done any marriage counseling or done any marriage studies or works, is I'll use this as an example, but there's a a really popular marriage group called the 5 Love Languages that people do, and it's great. I've led this group about 5 different times, but here's let me tell you the other side of it is when you learn the love language of your spouse and you learn what fills their love tank and all that, and they know that you know now,
You're screwed.
and you don't do it, it's way worse than if you complete ignorance. Okay? That's sort of what popped into my mind when you said that. When you have a brain full of recovery and you've earned all that stuff and then you relapse, it's got to be just
That's some guilt.
a avalanche
It
of
is.
guilt.
And it starts to snowball real fast.
And you can get you've heard this in meetings, people that have been clean for a long time. They say they know that if they started back up again, they would start up right where they left off and it would go 10 times worse instantly.
The only saving grace that a person who's in recovery for some amount of time and who relapses is to immediately tell on themselves.
Right.
And that is also a hard thing to do. But if you can catch it early like that before you start lying again, before you start hiding it from the people that now trust you, or before you start living a double life, then you do have a chance and you can learn from it. I think the common thing that people have that relapse who are in recovery is that we kind of taper off on our recovery.
Yeah.
We kind of lose the fire for it.
Yeah.
The people that really recover will do a lot of work in the early part of it. We'll learn what the steps are. I was really impressed with the steps when I started learning what they actually were. I was like, wow, there's some real substance to it.
Right.
And so I dug into that, and I did a long 4-step. I did a 5th step. I made amends. And then my life got a lot better. I started feeling a lot better. What can happen over time is that we kind of, what I have done many times in my recovery is I've become complacent and I've stopped really working the steps. And I'll talk about them and I'll acknowledge them, but I won't really put pen to paper. And that, to me, recovery is not just wishful thinking. We want it to be. We want to just kind of wish our recovery into existence every day. And that's what I was doing in my addiction. I was wishing that it would just go away on its own without having to actually do the work. Recovery is the same way. We have to do the work. And it's all there. The steps are there. There's a method to it if we take advantage of it. But I don't necessarily think it's laziness. I just think it's uncomfortable. And I tend to gravitate towards comfort.
Well, and it's the tyranny of the urgent. We have things in our lives that come up and they're important. And if it's new and something we got to fix, we tend to just work on what's important for that day. So it's really easy to say, well, I'm in this for the long haul. This is a marathon. I'll work on it tomorrow.
I'll work on it tomorrow is right. Or what the big book, the AA books, calls resting on our laurels. And so I will rest on my accomplishments in recovery and be like, well, that's good. And I'm doing good. I do a recovery podcast. I'm like Mr. Recovery. That's the lie that I can tell myself, that somehow if I just have enough knowledge about addiction, then I will somehow save myself from it.
Yeah.
But addiction does not care what I know. It doesn't care what I know because it's in my daily relationships with people and my relationship with God and with myself. That's where the addiction will start to hit. And if I start to feel lonely, and if my pride tells me, oh, you're fine, you shouldn't feel that way anyway, just swallow it down. You don't need to talk about it.
Yep.
Eventually, it is very possible for that relapse to creep in. And it will become a slow roll where that water's turned up just 1 degree every day until it's boiling and I don't even realize it.
It is, and it can be just anything can happen. It could be a situation where you hurt yourself and go to the emergency room.
I've been there, dude.
And they give you a little bit of that, and whatever that is, they give you a little morphine in your IV or whatever, and it's over.
My goal is to be more proactive in my recovery. I want to make a gratitude list each morning. I want to start reading a little bit more spiritual reading. I want to spend less time laying in bed at night browsing TikTok.
TikToking.
Yeah. and a little bit more time reading something of substance.
I think it's genius they called it TikTok, because when you're on there the whole time, the clock is just going tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. Oh, an hour went by.
It's a pure escape distraction, and I am so good at that.
I'm not on that as much, but I'm a YouTube-aholic. So I think there's different type addicts, right? TikTok is, what would you say TikTok is? Crack?
TikTok is crack.
YouTube, I think, is just a
meth. It's a longer burn. Like
I was gonna say, bath salts. I don't know. Like I know what that is.
YouTube is something.
Oh, YouTube is that's the long haul
It's
right
a
there,
long
man.
haul, man. You go down a YouTube rabbit hole.
It may be meth. It is, because you stay up for 3 days.
Yeah, and then,
all of a sudden, I'm on there for 4 hours, and all of a sudden I'm on giant cyst pops. And I'm like, how did I get here?
How did I get here?
What in the world?
That's exactly what someone using meth is going to ask themselves after 3 days in. How did I get here? Why are there chickens running around inside this trailer?
I started off
watching
a news channel,
Yeah.
and now I'm on Sasquatch came out of a UFO.
That's right.
Anyway,
That's right.
that's a good one. That was a good one today.
It was.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. If you have an experience with relapse, or you know someone who was in recovery a long time and then relapsed, please comment. Tell us what your story is. We would love to feature it on a future podcast. Stay sober and keep coming back.